It was 20 degrees below, and snow was falling like God had something to hide. The town of Hollow Ridge was dead silent, except for the creak of an old rope swaying above a wooden platform. They were about to hang a woman, and no one asked. Why? Her name was Maggie Carter, 62. Wrinkled hands, silver hair twisted in a bun, dress soaked from kneeling in snow all night. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She just stood there, lips chapped, eyes staring past the crowd like she already saw something they didn't. No family came. No preacher spoke. The sheriff cleared his throat and gave a small nod. A deputy kicked the trapdoor switch, and that's when the voice came. "Stop! Untie her! That woman is my mother." The noose still hung. The woman still stood. But the world around her changed. A man stepped out from the swirling snow, coat black as night, a scar across his jaw, guns holstered low. No one had ever seen him before. Not in Hollow Ridge, not in any nearby county. Whispers rippled through. The townsfolk. "Who is he?" "She ain't got no children left." "Didn't her son die 20 years ago in the war?" The sheriff squinted. "You got proof of that claim, mister?" The man didn't answer. He just stepped closer and handed Maggie a small wooden horse, carved, old, and cracked down the middle. Maggie's knees buckled because she'd buried that horse with her son, or so she thought. If your heart skipped, even once, you know you're in the right place. This story only gets deeper, darker, and more unforgettable. So before you move on, hit that subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment if you believe in stories where the past ain't done speaking yet. The silence that followed his words was thicker than the snow piling on rooftops. Maggie didn't move. Her fingers trembled as they wrapped around the wooden horse, the same one she carved for her son when he was 5. She remembered the morning clearly. He had a fever, and she whittled that horse by lantern light, whispering stories until he smiled again. She had buried it with his boots, in a coffin no bigger than a barrel, under a tree behind the old chapel, and now it was in her hand. The sheriff took a slow step forward. "Mister, I don't know who you think you are, but this ain't no place for tricks." The stranger didn't flinch. "No trick. You're about to hang a woman without trial, without preacher, and without mercy." He turned to the crowd. "Shame on you all." A few folks lowered their eyes. Some looked away. One man spat in the snow. The sheriff's jaw tightened. "She's been charged. You ain't from here. This don't concern you." "Oh, but it does," the stranger said calmly, his voice like low thunder. "Because you're about to make a mistake you can't undo." Maggie looked up, her lips barely moving. "Is it really you?" The man nodded, and for the briefest second his eyes softened. "It can't be," she whispered. "I buried you. I saw the uniform." He stepped closer, snow crunching beneath his boots. "They buried a name. Not me." Gasps echoed from the townsfolk. A woman in the crowd clutched her coat tighter. An old man muttered, "War does strange things." The sheriff signaled to the deputy, unsure. "Bring him inside. Let's figure this out." But the stranger didn't move. Instead, he looked around, voice rising with heat. "You all used to eat her bread when winters were lean. She cured your babies when they were burning with fever. And now? Now you'd let her hang. Like a dog?" No one answered. The wind howled louder, like the prairie itself was ashamed. Then, from the far end of the crowd, a voice spoke, raspy and slow. "She's no saint." Everyone turned. It was Samuel Pratt, the banker, face red, eyes sharp. "She tried to poison my wife. She said the Lord told her to do it." "She's not right in the head." "That's a lie!" Maggie cried suddenly, her voice breaking. "I tried to help her. She was bleeding. She was—" But her voice gave out, and her knees buckled. The stranger caught her. "I don't care what stories you've told," he growled. "She is my mother, and no man lays a hand on her again." The sheriff hesitated. "If that's true, we'll need proof. A birth record, a name, something." The stranger turned his head slowly. "You want my name?" he said, stepping closer. He pulled off his glove and showed the sheriff his palm, burned and scarred, with an old brand shaped like a horseshoe. Maggie gasped again, louder this time. "I branded you with the fire tongs. When you tried to ride the mule at 6, her voice cracked. "You cried for hours." The sheriff's eyes widened, but before anyone could speak, a shot rang out. Snow flew from the beam above the gallows. Someone had fired from the ridge, and the message was clear. He wasn't the only one watching. The gunshot echoed through Hollow Ridge like a church bell struck at midnight. Everyone ducked. The sheriff instinctively pulled his rifle. The deputy slipped in the snow, trying to shield his holster. Maggie flinched, and the stranger spun around, hand hovering near his hip. But no second shot came. Just silence, and snow, falling heavier now, dusting the gallows and blanketing the boot prints already vanishing under it. The sheriff looked too. The ridge, nothing but white pines and mist. "Get eyes on that shooter," he barked. 2 deputies ran toward the tree line, rifles drawn. The stranger didn't flinch. His focus was still on Maggie, who had sunken to her knees in the snow again, holding the wooden horse like it was a living thing. "I thought you were dead," she whispered, voice hoarse. "They told me. They said your body came back wrapped in blue." "I wasn't on that cart," he said. "They buried someone else wearing my tags." "But why didn't you come home?" He didn't answer right away. The sheriff stepped in. "We ain't got time for stories right now. Someone just fired a shot aimed high on purpose. That was a warning. Means someone out there doesn't want you two walking free." "Then maybe it's time they started running instead," the stranger said coldly. The sheriff narrowed his eyes. "You talk like a man used to drawing first. You military?" "I was." "Name?" The man hesitated. "Elias," he said finally. "Elias Carter." Maggie let out a sound between a sob and a prayer. She reached for his face, brushing a trembling hand over his cheek like she was touching a ghost. "You were just a boy when you left." Elias helped her up slowly. "And you were young enough to outrun me when I tried stealing cookies. Things change." Behind them, the crowd had thinned. Folks began slipping back into shops and homes, whispering as they went. But Samuel Pratt stood his ground. "That woman poisoned my wife," he shouted again. "You all gonna forget that just 'cause a man with a scar shows up?" Elias turned slowly, his eyes like storm clouds. "Tell me, Mr. Pratt," he said. "Did a doctor ever confirm that poison?" Pratt's lip curled. "We didn't need one. She served her a tea and she nearly died." "Did you drink the tea too?" Pratt didn't answer. "I did," a quiet voice came from behind. A woman in a patched shawl stepped forward, thin, gray-haired, eyes weary. "That same night, nothing happened to me. She gave that tea to half this town during last winter's sickness," another man added. "Helped more folks than any doc ever did." Pratt's face turned crimson. "You're all fools," he snapped. "That woman's cursed, and now she's brought something worse with her." The wind picked up again, and in it they heard hoofbeats. Fast, heavy. The 2 deputies came riding back from the ridge, one of them bleeding from a cut above the eye. "They're coming!" he shouted. 5 men! Masked! Rifles drawn! Looks like they ain't here to talk!" The sheriff turned pale. "Get everyone inside! Lock the doors!" Elias stepped forward, hand on his gun. He glanced at Maggie. "You trust me?" he asked. She didn't speak, just nodded once. Then Elias said something no one expected. Then, "Let's make 'em wish they'd stayed ghosts." The town of Hollow Ridge had never seen a gunfight, not a real one. Sure, there'd been drunken spats and broken jaws, but this was different. The tension in the air was sharp enough to slice through bone. Mothers dragged children indoors. Old men slammed shutters, and the church bell began to ring on its own, swung by the wind or by God, no one could tell. Sheriff Halden gritted his teeth as he loaded his Winchester. 5 men, masked, armed. Could be Pratt's hired guns, could be someone else. but they ain't here for tea. Elias didn't answer. He was already scanning the rooftops, gauging angles, exits, and shadows. His breath showed in the cold, air, calm and measured. Maggie stood just behind him, still trembling but no longer afraid. She had faced worse: grief, starvation, betrayal. A bullet? That was just another storm to weather. The deputy who'd been wounded wiped blood from his brow. They came in from the north, moving fast. Didn't fire at us directly, just close enough to warn. Elias nodded. They want us cornered. Or scared. Maybe both. Sheriff Halden motioned toward the saloon. That's the sturdiest building we've got. Brick walls, cellar, and a back door that opens to the alley. We'll hold there, Elias said, already moving. Inside the saloon, the warmth hit like a memory. The fireplace was lit, though no one had dared sit near it. The bartender, a man named Silas, looked up wide-eyed as the sheriff and Elias entered. You bringing the trouble in here? Silas asked nervously. No, Elias said, checking the back windows. We're meeting it here. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder. The masked riders didn't bother hiding. They wanted to be seen. 5 horses, 5 men, all draped in dusters and scarves pulled high over their faces, rifles strapped across backs. One of them rode with a red feather tied to his saddle, like a warning flag dipped in blood. They stopped just short of Main Street. Maggie stood by the saloon door, peeking through the curtain, and then she gasped. The man with the red feather. She knew him. Elias, she whispered. That's Josiah Fenn. Elias turned. You sure? I nursed him back from typhoid 7 years ago. He's the only man I ever saw with a scar across his tongue. He couldn't speak right. Then, what the hell's he doing riding with killers? Outside, Josiah raised one arm. A signal. The other riders dismounted and began walking toward the saloon, slow, steady. Not charging, just confident. Like men who believed no one inside had the guts to shoot first. Sheriff Halden cocked his rifle. I ain't about to die in a bar. Elias placed a hand on the sheriff's shoulder. Not today. Then, Elias did something strange. He walked, out the door, straight into the snow, unarmed. The 5 masked men stopped. One of them reached for his rifle, but Josiah shook his head. Elias raised both hands. You came for someone, he called. Well, here I am. The wind whipped between them, howling like a banshee. And Josiah finally spoke. His voice was low, raspy, and cruel. We didn't come for you. He pointed past Elias. We came for her. Elias didn't move. His boots stayed rooted in the snow, but something flickered behind his eyes. Not fear. Calculation. You came for her? He repeated, slow and low. Then say it with your face, not behind a mask. Josiah didn't flinch. The red feather in his saddle waved in the wind like a flag soaked in history. We don't take orders from ghosts, Josiah spat. She did what she did. It's time she paid. Inside the saloon, Maggie watched through the frosted glass. Her breath fogged the window. Her hand trembled near her chest where the wooden horse still hung by its string. Sheriff Halden leaned close to her. What in the Lord's name are they talking about? She didn't answer at first. Then, in a voice small as snowflakes, she said, Josiah had a brother once. Younger, wild, rode with a crooked gang until they came to my door bleeding and crying like children. What happened? The sheriff pressed. I gave them shelter, fed them, tried to change them, but one night they robbed a stagecoach just south of here and dragged a child into it. Left her for dead. God almighty, the sheriff muttered. I told Josiah I turned them in, Maggie continued, but I didn't. I led the marshal to the hideout myself. His brother was shot trying to escape. Josiah never forgave me. Outside, Elias took a slow step forward. 7 years, he said. That's how long she's lived with what she did. You think that ain't a kind of punishment? Josiah tilted his head. She's a liar, Elias. Always was. She makes you feel warm just before she pulls the rug out. You don't know what she is." "I know enough," Elias replied. "I know she nursed soldiers with frostbite, buried, neighbors with her own hands, and kept starving families alive with root broth when your kind were too scared to leave your shacks." "Don't talk like you know her better than me," Josiah growled. Elias smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile wolves show before the leap. "I do know her better than you," he said, "because I was the boy you all left." "Behind." Josiah's eyes narrowed. "I was the son you thought died, the one whose name she carved into every prayer. You think you can scare me off with your masks and rifles?" Behind Elias, the saloon door creaked open. Maggie stepped outside. No coat, no gloves, just her shawl and a face lined with more pain than age. "You want me, Josiah?" she said softly. "Then take me. I won't let you paint this town with blood because of my past." Elias turned sharply. "No," she touched his arm. "Son, please, you don't owe me your life." He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, clear enough for everyone to hear, "I owe you everything." Just then, a single shot rang out. But it didn't come from Josiah's men. It came from the roof above the saloon, and the man who fired it wasn't masked. He was in town clothes, boots polished, and wore a deputy's badge that hadn't been there earlier. The bullet struck the ground between Josiah and Elias, a warning. Then the man on the roof shouted, "This ain't just about Maggie anymore. That woman knows something. Something they buried years ago." Gasps erupted from inside the saloon. Elias glanced up at the man, his mind racing. "What the hell are you talking about?" he asked, but the man just chambered another round and said nothing. For a moment, the whole world seemed to freeze. The wind paused, the snow hung midair, and even Josiah's men held their breath. Elias narrowed his eyes at the man on the rooftop. He was clean-shaven, steady-handed, and far too calm for someone holding a smoking rifle. "You better speak plain," Elias called up, "before someone gets dead." The man adjusted his hat and looked directly at Maggie. "You remember me, ma'am?" he said, loud enough for the crowd in the saloon to hear. "Name's Deputy Roland Crane. I worked for your husband, back when he was marshal of this territory." Maggie's knees nearly buckled. "Marshal Whitlock," she whispered. Elias turned sharply. "You were married to Marshal Whitlock?" Maggie nodded slowly, eyes glazed like a woman seeing a ghost. "I was, a long time ago. Before the war, before the fire." Roland Crane kept talking. "Your husband left behind more than a badge and a good name. He kept a ledger. Names, dates, bribes, deals done in the dark, men like Josiah's brother, and the judges who protected them. Now even Josiah looked shaken. "You're lying," he barked. "I ain't," Roland replied. "That ledger disappeared after Whitlock died. Folks said it burned, but some of us always wondered if the fire wasn't an accident." Elias turned to Maggie. "You knew about this?" She shook her head. "I knew he kept secrets. I didn't know what they were. The fire," her voice cracked, "it wasn't set by outlaws. It was meant to kill him." Snow kept falling, quietly smothering the town in white. Elias stepped between Maggie and the 5 riders. "Josiah," he said carefully, "if what Roland's saying is true, this ain't about revenge anymore. This is about truth, about names that still walk free." Josiah's jaw worked. He was losing grip, not just on the situation, but on the story he'd told himself for 7 long years. He'd come for justice, but now it felt like he'd walked into something older and darker. "I just wanted her to pay," he said, but it sounded hollow. "She betrayed blood." "She tried to save it," Elias snapped. "She tried to change what couldn't be changed." Then, from behind the saloon, a new voice echoed across the snow. "She still can." Everyone turned. A wagon rolled forward, drawn by a tired black horse, and sitting at the reins was a woman in a worn black cloak and wide-brimmed hat. Maggie's eyes widened. Clara? The woman stepped down, older, sterner, with a scar across her cheek like a crack in stone. She has the ledger, Roland called down. She found it, hid it for years, and now she's ready to speak. Josiah reached for his gun. Elias was faster. He stepped forward, calm but commanding. Don't. Josiah froze. This town deserves to know what happened, who profited, who burned and who buried. Not just your brother, not just Maggie. Clara walked past the riders like they were statues. She stopped in front of Maggie and pulled something from her coat. A leather book. Old, charred at the corners. Maggie took it with trembling hands. It's time, Clara said, to tell the truth. The ledger felt heavier than it looked. Its cracked leather cover smelled like smoke and regret. Maggie's fingers trembled as she opened it, revealing pages yellowed by time and heat, ink smudged, names still legible. Clara stood silent beside, her like a monument carved by memory. Elias peered over Maggie's shoulder. Is that... He trailed off when he saw the first page. Judge Harmon, Sheriff Deeks, J.L. Brooks. All names still known in towns from here to the Dakota line. All names spoken with fear. Roland descended from the roof, rifle slung behind. Him. I served under Marshal Whitlock for 5 years, he said softly. He kept that book close. Said justice didn't always wear a badge. Said sometimes you had to write it down before it got swallowed whole. Maggie flipped a page, then stopped. There it was. Josiah Teller. Underneath, a line written in her husband's hand. Brother of Paul Teller. Suspected link to smuggling operation through Timber Pass. Advised to watch carefully. Josiah's eyes darkened. You see now? Maggie said, voice hoarse. It was never about me. It was always about what he knew. What he was ready to reveal. I didn't know, Josiah muttered. I thought you sold us out. I saved you, Maggie said, tears in her eyes. You just couldn't see it. He turned his face away. But Clara wasn't done. There's one more name, she said, her voice hard. The one that ordered the fire. The one that paid to have Marshal Whitlock silenced. Elias felt the wind shift. Who? He asked. Clara reached into her cloak and pulled out a folded letter, sealed with a broken red stamp. She passed it. To Roland, who opened it and read aloud. Paid in full. Dispose of the ledger. M.W. must not testify. D.H. The saloon crowd stirred. Roland lowered the letter, face pale. D.H. is Deputy Herald, Sheriff of Bitter Ridge, now a state judge. Gasps rippled through the townfolk like thunder rolling through snow. That man's still ruling court, someone cried. Appointed last spring, shouted another. Josiah stepped back like the ground had betrayed him. I rode for the wrong side, he whispered. Elias stepped forward. You can still change that, he said. Stand with us. Tell the truth. Josiah looked to Maggie, the woman he'd hated for years. She didn't plead, she didn't cry. She simply stood in the snow, with the past wide open in her hands. Josiah took off his hat, then knelt. I was wrong, he said. I'll stand with you. But just as the crowd began to breathe again, a single horse galloped into town, fast, urgent. The rider wore a blue coat with silver buttons, and he was yelling, Judge Harold's men are on their way. They know about the ledger, and they're not coming to talk. The town square turned to chaos. The rider barely reined in his horse before collapsing off the saddle, breath steaming in the cold air. They're 10 minutes out, he gasped. 6 riders, all armed, and they ain't wearing badges anymore. Maggie clutched the ledger tighter. Elias turned to Roland. If they're coming to bury this, we can't wait. We need to move. Where? Clara asked. Elias pointed. East beyond the chapel and over the snowy hills. There's an old mining tunnel past Widow's Bluff, narrow and hard to find. We hide there, wait out the heat, then ride for the state marshal in Cold Rock. He's honest. Josiah stepped, Forward. They'll chase us, you know that, right? Elias nodded. And we'll be ready. Maggie's voice was calm but firm. Let them chase. I'm done hiding. Clara gave her a proud glance. Then we'd better ride. The group moved fast. Maggie tucked the ledger inside her coat. Josiah and Elias checked their weapons. Clara helped the fallen rider into the wagon while Roland scattered powder on the ground to mask their tracks. As they rode out of town, snowflakes whirled harder, like the sky itself was trying to cover their escape. They didn't look back. But behind them, the rumble of hooves was already rising. An hour later, the group huddled deep inside the mining tunnel. The air was bitter cold, the stone walls damp and echoing with every breath. I haven't been here since I was a girl, Maggie whispered. My father used to say ghosts lived in these tunnels. They still might, Elias replied. But right now, we need 'em on our side. Josiah took position near the entrance with his rifle. I can hold them off for a bit if they find us. Elias shook his head. Not alone. Roland lit a lantern, revealing jagged mine beams and rusty cart rails. He placed the flame near the entrance to light just enough without casting shadows outside. Clara pulled a satchel from the wagon. I brought copies, she said, handing out folded sheets. Key pages from the ledger. If anything happens to the book, these still speak. Maggie looked down at the page in her hand, her husband's handwriting, her past, her pain, all etched in ink that now had the power to destroy men who ruled with fear. She folded it carefully and placed it in her blouse. I lost my husband to that fire, she said quietly. I won't lose his truth too. Suddenly, the sound of a whistle, then a voice, too close. We know you're in there. Come out, and maybe we won't burn it down. Josiah gritted his teeth. Looks like they found us. Elias cocked his rifle. Then they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The tunnel fell silent. The wind outside howled like a wounded animal, but inside, hearts beat louder than the blizzard. Maggie pressed herself against the icy wall, clutching the ledger like it was her last lifeline. Elias gave her a quick nod and took a position behind a fallen minecart, his rifle trained on the entrance. Josiah stood tall at the mouth of the tunnel, silhouetted by the snowlight. Put down your weapons, came a voice from outside. You've got no chance and no law behind you. Josiah didn't flinch. The law was murdered the day you burned that house with Marshal Whitlock inside. We've got the truth now, and this time it's gonna speak louder than your threats. A shot rang out, close, sharp, hitting just above his head. Clara pulled Maggie back, shielding her. Josiah didn't move. He raised his voice louder, stronger. I was one of you. I did your bidding. But today I break free. Another shot. Then silence. The snow fell heavier now, muffling sound and hiding movement. But Elias knew this wasn't over. He whispered to Roland, flank him from the woods. Circle back. We need surprise. Roland nodded and vanished into the dark passage that led out the back of the mine. Maggie turned to Clara. Why isn't fear stopping me anymore? Clara smiled faintly. Because truth gives courage nothing else can. Suddenly, Elias spotted a flicker of motion at the tunnel's edge. Down! He shouted. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the narrow entrance. Sparks flew from the stone walls. The wagon behind them shattered. Josiah ducked, returning fire, his aim steady, deliberate. Maggie covered her ears, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Then, a scream from outside. Then another. Moments later, a figure stumbled into view. One of the hired gunmen, arms raised, bleeding from the shoulder. We didn't sign up for this, he yelled. This ain't justice. This is a grave. Another rider bolted through the snow, followed by Roland with his rifle raised. 2 down, he said. The rest are spooked. Elias grabbed Maggie's arm. Now's our chance. We ride, fast. But where? To the state marshal, he said. And we ride with proof. Josiah, you with us? Josiah looked down at the gun in his hand, then at the wounded man on the ground. I've been on the wrong side for too long, he said. Let's end this. As they emerged from the tunnel, the snow opened up like a stage. 6 riders had become 3, and those 3, now unsure, now shaken, backed away into the storm. Maggie stepped out last, and for the first time in years. She wasn't running, she was chasing justice. They didn't stop riding until dawn painted the sky in pale streaks of silver over the snow-covered ridges. Maggie's hands were raw from gripping the reins. Her cheeks burned from the cold, her eyes stung with tears, part wind, part memory. Behind her, the tunnel and everything it held was fading in the distance, but the danger still rode close. The state marshal's outpost was another hour's ride. Elias kept checking behind, eyes sharp. No riders. Not yet. Clara guided her horse beside Maggie's. "You still have the ledger?" Maggie nodded, patting her coat. "Every page." Josiah, bruised and quiet, rode at the rear. He hadn't spoken much since the shootout. His soul carried weight now. Years of silence and guilt finally cracked open. Suddenly, Roland raised a hand. "Smoke," he said, pointing to the horizon. A thin column of black rising from behind a hill. Too dark for a chimney. Too steady. For a campfire. Could be a roadblock, Elias said. They might have known we'd come this way. Maggie clenched her jaw. "Then we ride through." But Elias held up a hand. "No, we're not risking your life or the ledger. We split. Maggie and I take the old ridge trail. You 3 keep riding straight. If we're being followed, they'll tail us." Josiah spoke up. "I'll go with her." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "Because if anyone deserves to make this right, it's her. And if someone's going to take a bullet for that truth, it should be me." Maggie looked at Josiah for a long moment, then nodded. "Let's ride." The ridge trail was treacherous, narrow, iced over, lined by cliffs and fallen trees. They rode single file, slow and silent. The snow up here was untouched, deep and soft, and every hoofprint left a mark of defiance. Halfway up the slope, Josiah slowed. "Do you remember that day?" he asked softly. "The fire?" Maggie didn't answer right away. "I remember screaming," she finally said, "and no one coming. I remember dragging Henry's body out with my bare hands while men in uniforms watched." Josiah winced. "I was one of them. I told myself it wasn't my fight, that I was just following orders." "You watched me burn," she whispered. He couldn't meet her eyes. "Yes." They rode in silence a while longer. Then Maggie said, "But you're here now. That ledger wouldn't exist if you hadn't kept copies. I don't forgive easily, Josiah. But I don't forget who finally stood beside me either." A gust of wind blew snow off the trees, swirling around them like ghosts. He looked at her, his eyes wet. "Whatever happens next, I'll make sure you get there," she nodded. "We both will." And they kept riding. Toward justice. Toward the marshal. Toward whatever end was waiting just past the snow. The trail narrowed until Maggie and Josiah had to dismount, leading their horses by the reins through knee-deep snow. The wind cut through the pines like a blade, and somewhere below, wolves howled, not in hunger but warning. Maggie gripped the ledger tighter inside her coat. Her fingers were numb, but her purpose burned hot. Then, a sound behind them. A twig snapped. Josiah froze. His hand moved to the pistol on his hip. Maggie ducked behind a thick fir tree. Through the swirling snow, they saw a shadow. It moved slow. Deliberate. Josiah whispered, "One rider." Maggie's heart thudded. He stepped forward. "Keep moving. I'll deal with him." "No," she said, stepping beside him. "Not anymore." The rider emerged from the trees, tall, wrapped in a snow-dusted duster coat. His face hidden by a scarf and a wide-brimmed hat, Josiah raised his gun. "State your business." The rider didn't flinch. He slowly dismounted, hands raised. "I ain't here to shoot," the man said. His voice was low, rough like gravel. "I'm here to warn." Maggie narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" The man pulled down his scarf. Maggie staggered back. It was Cole Bishop, the outlaw who vanished 5 years ago, the same man accused of robbing half the territory's trains. Thought dead. Hunted by bounty hunters. Josiah raised his pistol higher. "You're wanted in 3 states. Cole ignored him, looking straight at Maggie. "They're coming, not just hired guns. The judge himself is on the trail. He's sending marshals under his thumb. They aim to silence you before you reach the outpost." Maggie blinked. "How do you know?" "Because I used to ride with them," he said bitterly. "And because your name came across the wrong desk this morning." Josiah was still aiming. "Why warn us?" Cole exhaled, fog spilling from his lips. "Because I owe someone. Someone who once gave me bread when I was starving. You don't remember me, Maggie. But when your barn was burnt down and you had 1 loaf left, you split. It with a stranger. That was me." Maggie's lips parted. A faint memory flickered. A frozen night. A bleeding man. A whispered, "Thank you," as she handed him the last of her cornbread. "You're still a wanted man," Josiah said. "And you're a guilty one," Cole replied evenly. "But right now, we've got the same enemy." He looked back toward the trail. "They'll cut off the ridge in less than an hour. You need to go through Widow's Pass." Maggie paled. "That pass hasn't been used in years. It's full of ice bridges and dead ends." Cole nodded. "Which is why they won't expect you to take it, but it's your only shot." She looked at Josiah. He hesitated, then lowered his pistol. Maggie said, "Lead the way." And so the outlaw, the traitor, and the woman everyone left behind vanished into the white wilderness, toward Widow's Pass, and a fate no one could predict. Widow's Pass was more graveyard than trail. The narrow gorge twisted like a serpent between frozen cliffs, its floor buried under feet of untouched snow. Ice clung to the jagged rocks like teeth, and the wind howled through the pass like it mourned every soul that ever tried to cross it. Cole led the way, his boots sinking deep. Behind him, Maggie followed, the ledger pressed tight against her chest, and Josiah brought up the rear, watching the path and their backs. They moved in silence, breath visible in the frigid air. At one turn, the trail collapsed beneath a drift, revealing a drop of 30 feet. Cole threw a rope across a fallen pine, anchoring it with his weight so Maggie could climb. She hesitated only a second before grabbing hold. "I still don't trust you," she muttered as she crossed. "You shouldn't," he said without looking back. Josiah crossed last, quiet as always, but his eyes never left Cole. By mid-afternoon, the snow thickened, turning into a white wall. They found a narrow cave in the rock face and huddled inside to catch breath and light a small fire. Maggie pulled the ledger out, flipping through the worn pages. Ink smudged, but legible. Every bribe, every order, every name. Cole glanced at it. "You really planning to show that to the marshal?" "I plan to hand it to the U.S. attorney himself." Cole gave a dry chuckle. "You'll paint a target on your back bigger than that mountain." "I already have," she said. "But this town, this territory, they deserve to know who took everything from them." Josiah stared into the flames. "They'll bury it, or bury you." "Then I'll dig my way out," Maggie replied, voice steady. Cole's gaze lingered on her a moment longer. Then he stood. "Fire's gonna draw attention. We move in 10. As they packed up, the wind carried a sound, distant, but sharp. Gunfire. 3 shots. Then silence. Josiah spun toward the pass entrance. "They're closer than we thought," Cole swore. "They've split their men. They're flanking the ridges." Maggie's pulse pounded. "Then we go now." They rushed out into the storm, fighting wind and snow. Up ahead, the pass narrowed again, but the only way through was across an old ice bridge. It creaked even under the weight of snow. Cole stepped onto it first. "It'll hold if we go, one at a time." Maggie hesitated, then nodded. Josiah helped her onto it, one hand on her back, eyes scanning the cliffs. She moved slowly, foot by foot, heart in her throat. Halfway across, a crack echoed beneath her boots. Then, bang! A gunshot rang out from the ridge above. Snow exploded off the ice bridge. "Sniper!" Josiah shouted, firing back. Cole pulled his revolver, eyes scanning the cliff face. "Move, Maggie, move!" She ran the last few steps just as another bullet shattered the ice behind her. She fell into Cole's arms. Josiah dove after her, sliding just as the bridge gave a sharp groan, then began to collapse. The three of them tumbled down the slope on the far side, landing hard in the snow. Alive, barely. Behind them, the ice bridge crumbled, crashing into the ravine like thunder. They were trapped now. No going back. No retreat, only forward, into the heart of Widow's Pass, and whatever waited on the other side. The snow fell harder now, turning the pass into a white abyss. Maggie's breath came in sharp gasps as she pressed her back to the stone wall. Her coat was torn, her knuckles bloodied from the fall, but she held the ledger like it was her child, clutched to her chest even as the cold gnawed at her fingers. Cole crouched beside her, eyes scanning the heights. His face was stone, but his voice low. "They'll circle around, try to cut us off at Dead Man's Ledge." Josiah wiped blood from his brow. "Then we don't give them the chance." Cole looked between them. "There's a shortcut through Devil's Hollow. Steep. Icy. But it'll get us ahead." Josiah narrowed his eyes. "You sure? Or leading us into a trap?" Cole didn't blink. "If I wanted her dead, I'd have left her on that bridge." Maggie raised a hand. "Enough. We don't have time. Lead us." They entered Devil's Hollow just before sunset. It wasn't a path, it was a chute carved by 1,000 winters. Black rock jutted from snowbanks like spears, and the ice beneath their boots was so slick even Cole had to brace against the wall to stay upright. Maggie stumbled once, and Josiah caught her. She didn't thank him. The storm howled louder here. Echoes twisted in the dark like ghosts whispering warnings. Then suddenly, they heard horses. Close, too close. Maggie's eyes widened. "How?" Cole's jaw clenched. "They found another route. Smart bastards." Josiah spun. "We have to run." "No," Cole said. "We stand." He pointed ahead to a narrow bend, just 5 feet wide between two rock faces. "That's the choke point. They can't come through more than one at a time." Maggie stared. "You're suggesting we fight?" "I'm saying we give you a chance to get out," he said. "Me and him, we hold them. You climb the ridge, take the ledger, and run like hell." Josiah shook his head. "We're not splitting up. We stick together." "No," Cole said quietly. "She's the only one that matters now." They reached the bend. Cole drew both pistols, checked the chambers. Josiah unslung his rifle. "You any good with those?" Cole gave a faint smirk. "Better than the men. Coming." Maggie turned to them both. "If this is where we die, I want you to know, I never thought I'd rely on an outlaw and a liar. But here we are." Josiah looked at her. "I never meant for it to happen like this. Your husband..." "Don't!" she said, her voice sharp. "That truth will wait. Right now, we fight." She climbed the icy ledge as the first horseman appeared in the shadows. Rifle raised, Cole fired first. The echo of the shot cracked across the pass. The fight had begun. From her perch above, Maggie watched flashes of muzzle fire light the snow like lightning. Gunshots echoed, mingling with shouts and the scream of a wounded horse. She clutched the ledger tighter, a tear freezing to her. "Cheek," she whispered. "Please, just hold them." Then she turned and ran into the blizzard. Maggie ran through the storm like a ghost chased by time. The snow bit into her face, wind slicing across her skin. Every step was a battle against the cold and the guilt clawing at her heart. Behind her, the shots, the shouts. They grew, faint, swallowed by the mountains. She didn't look back. Couldn't. Ahead, a faint orange glow flickered through the trees. A cabin, hidden deep beyond the pass. She stumbled toward it, legs failing, heart thudding like a drum of war. When she collapsed, against the door it burst open, and an old man stepped out, rifle raised. "State your business." Maggie could barely speak. Her lips were blue. "Name's Maggie. Maggie Ford. I got evidence. They're killing them. They're—" She fainted. When she came to, she was inside. Fire roared in a stone hearth. The cabin was small but sturdy, old hunting lodge, built before the war. The man stood at a table, flipping through the ledger with trembling fingers. He looked up. "You don't know what you're holding, do you?" Maggie sat up slowly, her voice hoarse. "It's everything. Who they bribed. Who they killed." He nodded. "And who signed off on it?" She swallowed. "Who are you?" He hesitated. Then, "My name's Eli Granger. Used to wear the badge. Before they made me disappear." Her eyes widened. "You were the marshal?" "I was," he said, "till I asked the wrong questions." Outside, wind slammed the shutters. Snow piled high against the door. "You said they're after you?" Eli asked. "They split their men. My friends are holding them off in Devil's Hollow." He stared into the fire. "If they're smart, they won't last long." She rose, unsteady. "Then we go back. You step outside now. You'll freeze before you get a mile." Maggie's hands balled into fists. "I didn't come this far to watch good men die while I hide in warmth." Eli stared at her, then sighed. "You've got her eyes." She froze. "What?" He walked to a trunk in the corner, opened it, pulled out a rusted star, a marshal's badge. "My sister, your mother, was the only family I had. They said she died in childbirth. I never knew." Maggie blinked, breath caught. "You're my uncle?" He nodded. "And I'm not. About to lose you, too." He grabbed his rifle, tossed her a coat lined with wolf fur, and they stepped into the storm together. The wind screamed. But Maggie didn't feel the cold anymore. Back in Devil's Hollow, gunpowder thickened the air. Cole had one bullet left. Josiah lay beside him, shoulder grazed, bleeding into the snow. 3 bodies sprawled in the pass. But more were coming. Boots crunching on frost, shadows crawling toward them like death itself. Josiah groaned. "We're not gonna make it," Cole reloaded. "That ain't up to us." Josiah looked at him. "Why are you even here, Cole? What's in it for you?" Cole didn't answer right away. Then, "Because once, years ago, someone saved me. A woman. Didn't know who I was. Didn't care. She gave me bread and warmth, and said, 'Do something good with your life just once.'" Josiah blinked. "Who was she?" Cole looked toward the ridge. She looked just like Maggie. And just then, a howl pierced the silence. Not wind, not wolves. A rifle cracked from the ridge above, striking one of the approaching riders clean off his horse. Then another. Maggie, and behind her, the old marshal. Eli. They'd come back. The echo of Maggie's rifle still rang through the mountain pass. Below, the remaining riders hesitated, shadows flickering in the snowstorm, caught between fear and fury. From above, Maggie shouted, voice trembling but fierce. "This is your last warning. Turn back, or fall where you stand." Eli stood beside her, rifle steady, eyes like flint. "I know who you serve, and I've got a badge and a ledger to bury 'em all." One of the riders shouted back, "You think a dead man's badge scares us?" Cole, coughing blood, lifted his face from the ground and smirked. "It ain't the badge, it's the bullet behind it." Then fire erupted from above. Eli and Maggie rained down justice, bullet by bullet. Each shot fired with decades of pain, truth, and lost names stitched into the cold wind. Down in the hollow, Josiah dragged himself behind a boulder. His vision blurred, but his heart thumped like a war drum. He could barely lift his rifle. But when one of the raiders crept behind Cole, he found the strength. Bang, the man fell. Josiah whispered, Ain't taken him without me. Cole looked over, nodding faintly. Blood stained his side, but the fire in his eyes hadn't died. You old fool. I knew you had one more in ya. The last of the hired guns panicked. 2 turned and fled into the snow. Only 1 remained. He walked forward, slow and sure, removing his gloves as he came. A scar traced the side of his neck. Eli tensed. That's Fletcher Boyd. He ran the payroll. He's the spider in the middle of this rotten web. Fletcher smirked. Didn't expect to see a dead lawman and a farmer's daughter teaming up in my graveyard? Maggie stared him down. It ends here. He raised his pistol lightning fast, but Cole was faster. From the ground, half dead, Cole's shot hit Fletcher square in the chest. The outlaw dropped without a sound. The snow swallowed his body whole. Silence returned. A strange, beautiful silence. Not the silence of danger, but of peace. Eli lowered his rifle, glancing at Maggie. You all right? She nodded, shaking. They're gone. Josiah limped to them, leaning on his rifle. Ledger's safe. We did it. Cole coughed hard, blood on his lips. Maggie dropped, to his side. Don't you dare. You stay with me, Cole. He smiled faintly. Looks like I did something good. Just once. She grabbed his hand. No, not once. You did more than you know. Cole blinked slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. Tell the town. Tell them who they were. Tell them the truth. Then his eyes closed. Maggie sobbed. But then, Cole's chest rose, again weak, but alive. Eli leaned over. We gotta get him warm now. Maggie wiped her tears. Then let's get him home. As they carried him out of Devil's Hollow, the sun finally pierced the clouds. For the first time in days, the snow stopped falling, and Maggie Ford walked ahead, a ledger in one hand, and her uncle's badge in the other. She had come into this winter as a widow with no name. But now she had a voice, and the whole town was about to hear it. The sun cast golden beams over Pine Hollow as the 3 of them rode into town. Josiah on his mule, Eli leading the wagon with Cole half-conscious but alive, and Maggie walking beside. Them, her coat torn, face bruised, yet unshaken. Word had already spread like wildfire. People stepped out of shops, paused in the middle of chopping wood, froze with hammers in hand. A hush fell. Then came the whispers. That's Maggie Ford. She's alive! Is that Cole Wesson? Maggie didn't flinch. She walked straight toward the courthouse, pushed the doors open, and slammed the blood-stained ledger on the judge's bench. Eli followed, placing his old U.S. Marshal badge beside it. The judge stared, pale. This ledger has every name, Maggie said. Every bribe, every lie. Every man you let walk free while my father, my uncle, and my husband died. She turned slowly. This town let me suffer in silence. Now you'll listen. What followed changed Pine Hollow forever. Trials were held, officials removed. The banker, who gave the order to burn Maggie's ranch, was sentenced, and when the dust cleared, Maggie was offered the seat of mayor. She refused. I don't want power, she said. I want peace. Instead, she rebuilt her ranch. Not alone, but with Josiah, who swore he'd never miss another supper again. With Eli, who hung his badge for good and took to teaching kids how to shoot straight and think straighter, and with Cole. Weeks later, he stood on her porch, healed but changed. I never meant to stay, he said. Maggie folded her arms. Then don't. But don't pretend. You don't have a place here. He hesitated, glanced toward the horizon. You still think I'm a bad man? She smiled softly. I think you're a man who never had a chance to be good. Until now. Cole stared at her. Snowflakes fell again. Soft, gentle this time. He stepped forward, held out his hand. Maggie Ford. May I start over? She took it firm, unafraid. Yes, Cole Wesson. But this time, not as a ghost, as a man. In the years that followed, stories were told of the woman who stood up when no one else did, of the outlaw who came back from the grave, and of a town that was too cold to care, until one motherless stranger called her Mom. And for every soul who ever felt invisible, unwanted, or unheard, Pine Hollow became a place of second chances, because all it took was one woman who refused to stay quiet. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. And if you'd like to hear more tales like this, of courage, love, and justice in the Old West, hit that subscribe button and join our family here at Luminous Tales. We'd be mighty grateful to have you.